We're back for Your Ears Only. I'm David Alpern.
I'm Melissa Exelberth with a quote from the news. What do you do with that money? That was tech analyst Robert Peck on the windfall troubled Yahoo seemed likely to receive from its 9% stake in the Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba Group as it began going public. Also last week, shares of Twitter plunged as early investors became able to sell their shares for the first time, and AOL's stock plunged 20% after the company reported net income down 64% despite an 8% revenue increase. Now this.
Nobody can justify this. It does not show democracy. It shows a dictatorship run amok. It is a total violation of human rights. So I'm not prepared to sign off on the delivery of additional aid for the Egyptian military. I'm not prepared to do that until we see convincing evidence the government is committed to the rule of law.
Time was when journalists enjoyed a freedom like few others. They were granted access to places most people couldn't go, to be our eyes and ears and report on what they found, if not always what the grantors of that access hoped. But today's technology makes every dictator, terrorist leader, and militia chieftain master of his own Facebook page, Twitter feed, maybe YouTube channel, for which independent journalists are paying the price in jail time and blood. And that can affect foreign policy. Vermont Democrat Patrick Leahy, chairman of the Senate State Department and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, as we just heard, is currently blocking $650 million in military aid to Egypt, again run by a general, because of mass sham murder trials and detention of journalists. And Egypt's not alone. A report out by democracy-promoting Freedom House says global press freedom has hit a 10-year low.
Being a journalist has become more and more dangerous for many reasons. They are targeted by authoritarian leaders for refusing to toe the official line, by corrupt lower-level officials, powerful businessmen, and drug cartel chiefs protecting their turf. But declines in press freedom have also taken place in the United Kingdom and even the United States, where some big bylines face jail time for refusing to reveal confidential national security sources. With more details on where and why things have gotten worse or better for Your Ears Only, we have the author of that Freedom House report, Press Freedom Project Director Karin Karlaker. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
First, tell us how your ratings are determined, the formula and the factors you consider.
Well, the Freedom House report and index has been conducted for 34 years, and we really try and use it to provide an annual snapshot of the level of press freedom in every country in the world, looking both at the ability of journalists to do their jobs without fear of reprisals and the ability of people in each country to get news and information. We rate every country in the world on a score of 0 to 100 using a set of 23 methodology questions. So it's the same questions and criteria for every country. And those questions try and capture the entire enabling environment for media freedom. We look at the legal category, a political category, and the economic category.
And how do you weigh the relative repression of government sanctions, arrests, and such, as against kidnapping and assassination of journalists by criminals?
Well, we look at, all types of restrictions on journalists. So that could be, censorship or legal cases, which commonly would be, put in place by the government. Sort of assassinations and murders of journalists can actually be committed by both a state or non-state actors. So we have methodology questions that refer to all those issues. And we look both at restrictions by the government and by, let's say criminal gangs or other sort of Islamist groups or other non-state actors.
What are the worst countries when it comes to press restrictions?
Well, North Korea has been the worst for at least the last decade since I've been working on this, and it's been the worst in the world since then. And it's sort of, I think, in a category of its own in terms of the restrictions on media and also on human rights more generally. But we also have a category of 8 countries called the worst of the worst, which are really the worst performing countries in terms of the level of control over the media environment. And those countries include, several in Eurasia, such as Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Belarus. We have Cuba, we have Iran, we have several in Africa, such as Equatorial Guinea and Eritrea. And those countries are really places where there are sort of black holes for media freedom. There's very little news getting in and out, and very severe repression of journalists.
Europe has the highest level of press freedom, according to your report, yet the region's score had the second largest drop last year. How do you figure that? Or how do you explain it?
Well, Europe, as you said, it's traditionally the best performing region, but we've seen worrying declines in the last few years. 2 years ago, it was because of a lot of the impact of the economic crisis on the media environment, and we've seen continuation of that trend in countries such as Greece, which saw continued declines this past year as journalists faced, more harassment and legal restrictions. But we also count Turkey in the European region, and this past year, Turkey was, one of the more significant declines in our report, mostly due to the fact that journalists were being fired for trying to report on sensitive issues. We had issues of censorship regarding the Gezi Park protests during the year, and then also Turkey also has the highest level of imprisonment of journalists last year.
Which countries have the most improved press freedom, and what prompted that?
Well, it was interesting this year. We really saw Africa as a bright spot in the world. Every other region showed declines, but Africa, there were a number of improvements. 8 out of the 11 significant improvements occurred in Africa, and predominantly West and Southern Africa were the bright spots. What we really saw is, new governments that have come into power recently showing more respect for press freedom and trying to improve the media environment. So in West Africa, I'd like to highlight Cote d'Ivoire. Togo also showed improvements, and Senegal and Mali as well. In Southern Africa, we had improvements in Zimbabwe, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and in Madagascar.
In regions where traditional press restrictions are in place, including state-run media, is new media picking up the slack, getting around those restrictions, and how well?
Definitely. I mean, one of the most positive trends we've seen worldwide is the increasing role of new media, which does seem to be, in almost every case, more open than the traditional media. And in countries where, for example, the broadcast media are under state control, and there are very few independent newspapers, new media is really the place where you see pushback against the government or a range of, news and opinions. So in most places, new media is able to do that if there are not sort of restrictions on online content in terms of censoring or blocking websites. So that is definitely a positive trend overall. And in many places, because of the increase in internet usage and in mobile phone and smartphone usage, that's really how new media are able to reach out and, to get views out to a larger audience.
Thank you. Karin Karlaker is Press Freedom Project Director at Freedom House.
Quote from the news, "I don't like basketball. I love basketball. It represents the best in team sports and character building, and it's fun." That was former Citigroup and Time Warner chairman Dick Parsons, an African-American, on being named interim CEO of the Los Angeles Clippers, as the estranged wife of owner Donald Sterling indicated she would fight to keep from losing her share in any sale forced by the NBA because of Sterling's racist remarks and actions over the years.
Next, vampire science. Seriously, for your ears only.